And I think, given again that this Lord Justice Bean is a Fabian, it's no surprise that he would rule in the way that he has, because it's been Fabians that have been the architects of a lot of this legislation that has led to the asylum seekers being in the hotels in the first place.
It could so easily be translated as, people might feel emboldened in getting their own government that they elect and pay for to do what they want. It's like that's sort of the implication.
Ordeal that we're going through at the moment represents so many different points of failure over such a long period of time that we're now at this point where we have government ministers going on Sky News saying, yes, we agree with our lawyers and our judges that the rights of these asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, trump the rights of concerned local parents.
And so we do have a problem with free speech in the country. It really is getting a lot worse all the time.
Hello and welcome to Deprogrammed. This is the New Culture Forum's show where we do our best to fight back against the forces of ideological conformity, particularly among the young. My name is Harrison Pitt. I am a fellow at the New Culture Forum, and since Connor is still away in America, I am joined this week by Charlie Downs, who is the campaigns director at Restore Britain and a writer for the Daily Mail, and our special guest this week, none other than Elliott Hammer, who is a pro-free speech lawyer and litigator with a particular expertise in whistleblowing cases, and also the chairman of the Tottenham Conservative Association. Elliott, Charlie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Good. Right, so I'm going a bit of a setup here. So Nigel Farage is testifying on Capitol Hill this week about the state of free speech in Britain. Funnily enough, within the same week, we have also seen two relatively high-profile cases of anti-regime individuals being arrested in very suspicious circumstances to do with things related to speech. First, we had 22-year-old Callum Barker, who is a citizen journalist and activist who's been dubbed the Lion of Epping, who was arrested under suspicions of inciting racial hatred when the Court of Appeal shot down the High Court decision relating to the Epping Hotel and its closure. Elliott, we'll come to you in a moment for more details on that case. And then secondly, of course, more high profile, more recently, we've seen Graham Linehan, who is the comedian behind Father Ted, and he was arrested by 5 armed officers at Heathrow Airport on his way back from Arizona for anti-trans statements. We will also get to those. But first, let's talk about the legal context, Elliott, the Epping decision that prompted protest this weekend or last weekend, that backed the government provisionally in its argument, reaffirmed by Bridget Phillipson over the weekend, that the rights of asylum seekers should take place over the concerns of local residents in Epping. What exactly happened here? What had the High Court ruled, and what did the Court of Appeal rule?
Yeah, thanks. So the initial hearing was in the High Court, so brought by Epping Council, Conservative Council. I'm a Conservative, by the way, so
that's fine.
I've got to fly the flag somewhere. So Epping Council brought a claim for an injunction under the Town and Planning Act, effectively, which was to stop the use of housing asylum seekers in this particular hotel. And the argument was, so in legal terms, the argument was that there had been a change of use, and they'd not got planning permission. To sum it all up, and so there's going to be a trial of that question on the 13th to the 17th of October. But in the meantime, Epping asked the High Court, High Court Judge Eyre, if he would grant an interim injunction, which would effectively kick the asylum seekers out of the hotel. So the High Court originally granted, what is an interim relief application, an interim injunction, and so the asylum seekers would have to leave. And there was a lot of fanfare. A lot of people were very happy about this decision. A lot of people, of course, weren't very happy. It then went to the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal recently, I think it was the 1st of September, handed down
Sounds
the decision.
about right, yes.
Yeah. And what had happened, just before the High Court gave its decision, the Secretary of State had applied to intervene. And the Court of Appeal goes through what actually happened. Both parties were a bit of fault. Epping Council should really have invited them in, and the Secretary of State should have got involved a lot earlier. And so the Secretary of State applied to intervene, and they were successful in the getting involved. So when we come to the actual decision and the rights and wrongs of it, the test, so to speak, is based on what's called the American cyanamide test, which is
what's called what? Sorry,
it's a case from
yes.
I think from the 70s, American cyanamide, right? And effectively, the question before the court is, when you're granting an interim injunction, so something that happens now,
yes,
but which will later be reconsidered when you get to trial.
Yes, the trial, we should say, the full
trial which will happen on the 13th and 17th October. So it's not finished yet.
Indeed,
we've got the Court of Appeal decision, but it's not all finished. The question before the court is, effectively, where does the balance of the hardship lie? Should we do the thing that the person at Epping is asking? Should we remove these asylum seekers from the hotel now, or should we just wait?
Yes.
Should we just wait to see what happens at trial? Because, of course, if you remove the asylum seekers now, but when you get to trial, that decision was wrong. The asylum seekers have left. They've been removed from their location. They've got to find somewhere else, or the government has to find somewhere else for them. Or do we just hold the ring? We just keep the status quo. So the High Court decided that the hardship, the balance of the hardship, fell on effectively the local people of Epping.
Yep.
And the Court of Appeal said no, for various reasons. The judge got his discretion wrong. And
the High Court judge, they're saying.
The High Court judge got his discretion, because it's a discretionary decision from the judge.
Yes.
But the Court of Appeal said, because he got a number of factors wrong, then his discretion falls away, and actually the balance of convenience, holding the ring, is what should happen.
Right.
Now, we might go into the politics of it all, I'm sure we will do, but in many ways as a lawyer, because I bring these kind of cases all the time, injunctions, they are hard to get, because effectively the court normally thinks, well, let's just keep it as it is, especially if the trial is coming up in October. It's only next month. It's not that long. And so when I was reading the High Court decision, I was thinking, this is a bit odd. I wonder how he gets to the decision to grant the injunction. And then when you read the Court of Appeal decision, you think, well, subject to all the political discussions that we might have, perhaps on balance it's the right decision. But that doesn't mean, and oftentimes the court says things like this, they're not making a political decision on whether we should have asylum seekers at all, or where they should go, or what the national strategic plan should be. They're not making a decision on that. So that's where we are with the Court of Appeal. So the Court of Appeal said no to the interim injunction. Epping Council have applied to the Court of Appeal for permission to go to the Supreme Court,
which has been denied.
Court of Appeal said no.
Yes.
I understand, I think this is right, that they've made an application to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court has still yet to make a decision. Managing expectations, I would guess that the Supreme Court would say, come on, we've got a trial in a very few, we might not even get into the Supreme Court before the trial starts. So why would we revisit it? But I might be wrong. The Supreme Court might decide for whatever reason they want to hear it, or they want to go through it. Of course, a lot of national interest in this. It's been on the front page of the papers. So we will see. And
nevertheless, that decision did require, I would argue, the Court of Appeal effectively to rule implicitly, at least, given that they're making a balance of convenience judgment, that the present-day policy of the government, which many people in the country view as downright treacherous, even treasonous, their right to pursue that policy we should err in favour of that as opposed to the concerns of local residents in Epping. And bear in mind that what initially started this trouble in Epping was the fact that there were plausible allegations of asylum seekers committing crimes
breaking
the law and committing crimes against children in the area. So one would have hoped that they would have accorded that more weight, but it is understandable in the abstract why, in balance of convenience terms, given that there's a trial next month, they would rule in favour of the government. But nevertheless, it requires both the government and indeed the Court of Appeal to make some pretty staggering concessions about what they regard as a priority. Did you note any sort of politicised features in the judgment, Charlie? What did you make of it overall? Did you view it as a sort of an example of judicial oligarchy, or what's your view?
Well, I mean, there has been this sort of graphic going around showing that the judges, especially Lord Bean, for example, Lord Justice Bean, are quite openly partisan individuals. You know, he was literally the chairman of the Fabian Society, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And yet I think it was the judge, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Elliot, the judge who actually made the decision in the first place was a Conservative.
I think he wanted to be a Tory MP. He was on the list. Yeah.
So it's obvious that underneath the veneer of like judicial neutrality,
yes,
there is this roiling, bubbling, political aspect to all of this. And I think, given again that this Lord Justice Bean is a Fabian, it's no surprise that he would rule in the way that he has, because it's been Fabians that have been the architects of a lot of this legislation that has led to the asylum seekers being in the hotels in the first place. Right, yes. It springs out of a very particular ideology which many of our leaders actually conform to.
Yes.
Now, I understand that the concern by the Home Office was that this injunction, had it been allowed to pass, would have set a precedent that then every other council across the country would have been able to cite to say, well, Epping got their injunction to remove these asylum seekers, why can't we do the same? Then the government would be facing a situation where they've got these 34 plus thousand asylum seekers currently in the hotels, and nowhere to put them. So it's obvious from a sort of a government strategy point of view why they wanted to shut this whole thing down, because they'd be pretty screwed if it did come to pass that all of these hotels were going to be closed. But that then begs the question, why the heck are we even pursuing this policy in the first place? Right. Using the hotels? Yes. It represents this whole ordeal that we're going through at the moment, represents so many different points of failure over such a long period of time that we're now at this point where we have government ministers going on Sky News saying, yes, we agree with our lawyers and our judges that the rights of these asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, trump the rights of concerned local parents.
Indeed.
Hello, please excuse this brief interruption, but I'd be really grateful if you could please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel. Our mission is vitally important, and we must grow this channel to ensure that our content reaches the biggest possible audience. The best way to do this is for you to subscribe. It's totally free. And in addition to subscribing, if you're able to donate or join our membership scheme, please click on the link in the description or visit our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. We've got great plans ahead, but we can't do it without your support. From only £4 per month, you'll receive a range of perks and benefits, including exclusive content. Thank you.
I think we're not out of the woods yet. So the key question, and again, if I might be wrong about this, don't sue me, kind of thing. But as I understand it, the question is not whether it's operating as a hostel. The question is whether there's been a change of use from a hotel. So, quite a nuanced legal argument there. So it's not, is it a hostel? It's whether there's been a change of use from a hotel. And what happened is the hotel has not made an application to change its use.
Indeed.
And so if at the trial we get a decision which is there has been some unlawful behaviour, whatever it is, by the hotel, it might be the case that these types of proceedings run, by reform councils or by conservative councils, whatever, against these hotels. It might be that a lot of them are successful, in which case you're still going to have this issue about where do you house asylum seekers. So it's not going to change much in the fact that we didn't get this injunction. There still will be a national question and a concern and a strategic, what do we do with all these people? If the ultimate decision at trial is you can't house them in these kind of places.
Right. So they're just kicking the can down the road.
That's what. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's one thing that nevertheless remains telling is that sort of human rights lawyers and the judicial oligarchs in our very politicized, I would argue, domestic judiciary are very, very happy to burden the state and to burden taxpayers whenever doing so redounds, it goes against the interests of the British people. And this is where you see these ridiculous cases applied through the Human Rights Act of people saying that, no, we can't deport this Albanian rapist or this Jamaican pervert because his son likes chicken nuggets or because he deserves a right to a family.
Yeah.
That undoubtedly burdens the British state. It undoubtedly burdens British taxpayers, and it certainly burdens the safety of children, the safety of women, particularly if they do have a track record of being sexual predators in some way. Yet when an opportunity comes before the judiciary to burden the state in a way that actually might redound to the interests of the British people, in fact, put it this way: let's say that, because one of the things that Lord Justice Bean said in his rounding up, which I did think was very telling, Elliott, and tell me if you disagree, because even if you're handing down a decision that's right in legal terms, which it may well be, it doesn't mean that you can't filter it with all sorts of political giveaways in your rounding up. He said something along the lines of, he basically problematized the British right to protest, because he said that part of the reason why the balance of convenience, in my view, falls on the government in favor of the government in this case, is that if they would set a precedent, as Charlie just said, and that may incentivize more people to protest, in other words, to exercise their rights in a democratic society, and it could lead to the closure of more hotels and all the rest of it. If that were to happen and the government were to find itself confronted with this crisis, it might make them take the concerns of their own people a little bit more seriously, and it might corner them into making a decision that is actually good for us, namely, maybe we should just wash our hands of this altogether and engage in, and embrace an unapologetic policy of mass deportations. So when you're burdening the state in that way and cornering it in that way, which would be very good for us, all of a sudden judicial oligarchy is nowhere to be seen.
I'm a lawyer, so I'm always going to support the judiciary. They're all great, right? I think the comeback on that is the judges might say, well, look, hey, if you pass the laws, if you pass the laws which are, pro what you're all talking about, then we will interpret them accordingly, Whereas they might say that they are in a liberal democracy which has certain values and certain laws passed. We've got the European Court of Human Rights, we can talk about it. We've got the Human Rights Act. They need to interpret it properly, correctly, in accordance with European jurisprudence as well as our own. Yep. And I think what you're talking about really is the fact that Article 8 is perhaps very widely interpreted by the judiciary. Again, I'm getting through all those kind of arguments and the rights and wrongs of that. But I understand exactly what you're saying. To push back, the judiciary might say, well, we've only got the laws we're given. So the Parliament says what the law is, we say, what the law means.
Yes. Although, of course, there are cases of the living instrument doctrine, meaning that they are making laws themselves. But yes.
Yeah. If I could just come in here, what he actually said was not that it would cause more protests, but allowing the injunction to be put in place would cause lawlessness. Yes. And I don't think there was any indication that there was mass lawlessness going on with these asylum hotel protests. Actually, in most cases, they seem to have been very well disciplined, peaceful, and basically the expression of ordinary, the anger of ordinary people. Right?
It is crucial, if I may just say, it is crucial to point out, you're right, he did mention lawlessness. He did also mention legitimate, lawful protests. Right. And so that was the nub of my point, that the fact that he was problematizing that right that we enjoy goes to show that I think that there was more that meets the eye here politically.
Yeah, I think what he was saying is the original High Court decision was based on the fact that there were protests, they need to be taken into account. And he was saying, well, if you use that as a reason to grant the interim injunction, you're going to incentivize people to protest even more.
Yes.
I think that's a fair argument.
But they have a right to do that.
It's a fair argument to make.
Right.
But again, as you say, the counter argument is, we do live in an open society and people have the right to protest. Yeah. It's one of the fundamental rights that we have. So it's all that kind of, the balancing that you have to bring in.
It may be, I agree. Look, but it could so easily be translated as, people might feel emboldened in getting their own government that they elect and pay for to do what they want. It's like that's sort of the implication.
Yeah, and I would say, like on this point, actually what they're showing is that these peaceful means don't work. What they're showing by taking this decision, which is not to endorse non-peaceful means,
indeed,
disavow, etc.
Yes.
But by saying that, as you've just said, acting in the interests of local people who are making their voice heard in a peaceful and democratic way, it might incentivize more of that. Well, what recourse are you leaving those people with?
Yes.
Because the ballot box doesn't work,
Yes.
peaceful protest doesn't work.
Yes.
What exactly are people supposed to take from that?
Quite. But I think you probably are right to say the responsibility falls more with the government for even daring to make this pretty oikophobic, anti-patriotic argument in the first place. I mean, they condemn themselves by the very nature and force of their argument, and the responsibility lies more with people like Starmer, Phillipson, than it does with the judiciary, which could be interpreted as just doing their best to interpret the laws as stated, even though they tend to filter all sorts of political judgments into that.
Let me give you one thing, Justice Bean. So I saw in the papers a lot was made of the fact that the government said that the rights of asylum seekers outweighed the rights of the locals. Bean, in the Court of Appeal judgment, he actually says that they didn't put that in there. I think it was in the written appeal arguments. They tried to make it in oral arguments, but they slapped them down.
Yes.
So you've got to wonder, why is the Labour government making these grand statements and then not even being able to deploy them in a court?
Yes, and it should be said in favour of the three appellate court judges. They did say that we find the notion of a hierarchy of rights unattractive, or something like that. And so,
avoidable.
But something like that. But nevertheless, let's get now into the state of free speech. You do a lot of free speech cases, don't you, Elliott?
Yeah.
Viewpoint discrimination cases. Tell people very briefly a little bit about your background in that.
Yeah. So I've been an employment lawyer for about 20 years, and before maybe let's say 2018, I did discrimination for disability, race, all the kind of thing, and then 2019, I got a case against the Tavistock. My big case, I was Times Lawyer of the Week for a week. Against the Tavistock, Sonia Appleby, she was the safeguarding expert there. We won that case. You can read about it if you just Google Sonia Appleby against the Tavistock. And then since then, it's just been a progression of just more freedom of speech cases. So at the moment, I've got 3 reform councillors or just members who've been sacked or been treated, arguably, their contention is that they've been treated discriminatorily from their employers. One of them, Dan Cooper, he was interviewed by Peter Whistle on NCF. And then the other 2 are represented, they're supported by the Free Speech Union. So I'm doing a lot of those kind of cases where somebody's been sacked. They've said something on Twitter or they've stood for reform and their employers sacked them. I had a case against the Liberal Democrats, the party. My client, Natalie Bird, she wore a T-shirt saying woman, adult human, female, and she was suspended for 10 years. So we claimed against the Liberal Democrats. They admitted, and we won the claim on that. So, I mean, it's effectively 80% of my cases now. It's gone absolutely crazy. And what people say, that there really is a problem with free speech at the moment is true. My caseload, just proves that. Not necessarily from the government either. It's just employers and people who think that employers who think that people don't have a right to say what they feel. We're a country governed by the people, for the people, of the people, and part of that means that you should be able to go on over Twitter or TikTok or whatever and talk about your political beliefs or your political ideology or whatever, whichever way they fall. And so we do have a problem with free speech in the country. It really is getting a lot worse all the time. And we're going to come on to Glenna.
Yes. So
to play devil's advocate, Elliott, I'm interested in what you say to this. Is it not an employer's right to, if they feel an employee is going to bring their brand into disrepute by making political statements online, what are potentially radical or politically incorrect political statements, do they not have a right to sack them?
So the simple answer is no, right? The kind of free market analysis is what you're saying, is that, your employer hires you, you should be able, you should shut up. And if your employer doesn't like what you're saying, they should say, look, your employment contract says, I pay you $50,000 a year, you do your work and you shut up, We don't live in that kind of society. Query whether we want to do. Article 10, European Court of Human Rights, protects people, gives them freedom of speech. I acted for the Free Speech Union in one of the biggest cases, which is Higgs versus Farm School. Don't know if you've heard about that one, but that was in the Court of Appeal. Essentially, it has some free market analysis in there, which says that if to a certain extent, if what you're saying is lawful, i.e., you're not causing wanting someone
inciting violence,
back and stuff, you can say an awful lot on Twitter. The further up you go in the ranking of your employer, the less rights that you have, the more restrictions that the employer can lawfully put on you. So there is some free market analysis into the state of the law, but I know where you're coming from, but it's a delicate analysis, and obviously, it's balance of the competing rights of the employer and the employee.
Because this is one of those questions, Harrison, before we came on, we were talking about where we actually stand on the issue of free speech. Because I think there's a lot of people certainly in our kind of sphere of politics who would describe themselves as free speech absolutists. And I don't know whether I would even describe myself as that, because I'm not a liberal, and free speech is obviously a liberal principle. And I do kind of think, I have a company, a very small company, but if I employed somebody and they were then on the internet, expressing support for communism and that sort of thing, I wouldn't exactly want that associated with my company, Yeah.
No, and it's very true. But we're here talking. This is crucial. I think you will agree with me, Elliott. That you deal primarily with civil cases relating to free speech, to do with employment tribunals, where the standards sort of set upon the judgment handed down are that you need not what was the case in criminal law? What's the opposite of preponderance of the evidence? The
bounds of probabilities and beyond reasonable doubt.
Beyond reasonable doubt standard, which is very high in criminal law, and then in civil law, it's more preponderance of the evidence is what rules. And so I am certainly in favour of being a great deal more permissive around free speech when it comes to criminal law. And maybe around civil law, there's more room for employers' reputation in relation to the state. And these are the two cases I want to talk about today that relate to criminal prosecutions that tell a very dark tale about the state of free speech in Britain. First, the Callum Barker's arrest in Epping. He was protesting in the immediate aftermath of this Court of Appeals decision, Elliott. And Essex Police basically said that he was inciting racial hatred, and they pointed to the fact that he set a banner alight, allegedly. I don't even know if that's true. It's worth noting that when Hare Hills was on fire last year, only 6 people in total were arrested by West Yorkshire Police. So that tells you something about the interest that police take in eruptions of discontent on the streets of Britain. Are you in favour, primarily, this is to both of you, of blaming the state of the law here around free speech, the fact that the law gives too wide a scope to incitement to racial hatred and has done probably since the 1965 Race Relations Act? Is the law to blame, or is it the way in which the law is applied by the police, or both?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I'm an American lawyer as well. I'm qualified in New York. And so obviously we've got the First Amendment. I was talking with someone about this today, because Wes Streeting has gone on the Telegraph, and he says that we need to look at free speech, because of course Keir Starmer said to Donald Trump, didn't you, we're very much highly free speech. Very good. Maybe it's quite easy and maybe correct to say that we've gone too far. You want some restrictions on speech. You can't incite immediate violence, and that's generally the rule with the First Amendment. You can't be in a certain place saying, kill him.
Imminent lawless action is the standard in America.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's so many criminal statutes restricting speech here and speech there. Mm-hmm. We'll come on to Glenna, because he I think it's section I've got it here, section 29 of the Public Order Act. But there's loads of different acts that you could be found guilty of. Also, we've got the Online Safety Act that's just coming in. That's got a raft of new restriction of speech acts in there. So probably, I think we've probably gone too far.
State of the law. And Charlie?
Well, I mean, I remember a few years ago, everybody was talking about Section 127 of the Communications Act 2003, and that was like the big banner sort of example of anti-free speech legislation in Britain. But it does seem to me that, as with so many of these things, like, for example, the various human rights laws that have sprung up out of the Human Rights Act and earlier the ECHR. It seems like we have this quite complex, messy web of legislation, and it's quite hard to actually pin it down to any one law that is kind of restricting speech. I wonder whether that is by design. I suspect it probably is. Like, for example, obviously what you've been looking at recently, Harrison, the way in which the ECHR is interwoven into the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes.
I suspect that these things are baked in to these to these agreements or whatever in a very deliberate way to make it really difficult to to extract these laws and get rid of them. So I think that the law side of it is certainly a problem in that way. But then when it comes down, politics, it's always a question not of when, where, or why, but of who, right? And the people who occupy the positions of authority within the judiciary, many of them do seem to be politicized, right? Many of them seem to essentially be true believers in the doctrine of human rights, which is to say they do view the job of the state as being to guarantee the human rights of every person in the world, which in reality translates into the creation of this sprawling managerial state that in reality suppresses the freedoms of ordinary people. But again, it's the people like Lord Justice Bean who actually believe this stuff. Because I think there's no other reason that he wouldn't be making the decision that he has with regards to Epping than that he believes in the doctrine. Because otherwise it just looks like he's immoral, basically. And I'm prepared, maybe this is foolish of me, but I'm prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt and sort of believe that he does actually believe this stuff. Indeed. And so there is a personnel problem as well.
Yes.
And I don't know, I don't know enough about the issue to know where that comes from, whether it's a problem with the universities and where these people are educated in law. Elliott, you may have views on that. Whether it is just the culture at large that we live in now, and what's normal, what's acceptable, what's popular in the mainstream, that's creating a pressure on these people, that creates a pressure within the industry. Perhaps you have to have certain views to get certain jobs. That's certainly the case elsewhere. So I think the point I'm driving at here is it's a multifaceted problem.
Yes.
And it's going to take a lot more. I think it's going to take a lot more than just repealing some laws.
I couldn't agree more. And just to name one or two more facets that are crucial in embedding this very alien system in Britain, alien to our common law traditions, not least, which are overwhelmingly on the side of freedom as regards things like speech. The Americans didn't get their First Amendment out of nowhere. They're very indebted to us on that score, and we have since lost sight of it. They had the good sense to entrench it in 1787. But the other things that matter, not just the mentality of the judiciary and the written text of statute laws, which at the moment militate against free speech, I would say, but also the mentality and training and the ideological ideological state of police forces, of Crown prosecution services, these sorts of things, which dictate when they do and do not take an interest in written law. So you might have, for example, technically, there's nothing about our sort of incitement to racial hatred laws or racial aggravation laws that it says it only applies against non-whites. But at no point, according to Laurie Wastel, who was on the show the other day, who's done a lot of digging into this, at no point has the Crown Prosecution Service ever sought to exacerbate a rape gang's charge because of the anti-white animus of the people who were committing it, which technically they have a right to do under the Racial Aggravation Act, I think of the late 1990s, but they've just never made that decision to do so because it wouldn't be considered politically correct to zone in on that. So the mentality of the Crown Prosecution Service also matters, and the Crown, and because it dictates when and whether certain institutions, whether the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, the judiciary, whoever it might be, take an interest in things that are going on. So this sort of extra legal aspect, I think, is also important.
You're right. Again, we live in a country of the people, by the people, for the people. But at some of that, you're right as well, is who is the complainant in these sorts of cases. So there's some discussion about who has complained about Graham Linehan.
Yes.
But if you have a kind of mob, a phalanx of people who, for whatever reason, want to complain about certain people, that will happen because they will make the complaints to the police, they will make the complaints to the CBS, and then they will go through the system. We don't perhaps have a phalanx on the other side, which is saying, well, hang on a minute, he's done this, and hang on a minute, he's done that. Maybe that's what needs to happen to balance it up. So you could argue that maybe we don't need a change in the laws. What we do need is more people entering into the legal system as complainants on the other side.
Yes.
It is interesting.
Let me just read Graham Linehan's tweets so we can close the discussion on Linehan. So these are the things that he was arrested coming back from Heathrow by 5 armed officers. Apparently he was wound up being hospitalised by the experience. I don't quite understand why that was the case.
His blood pressure was like 200 plus, and he was in stroke territory.
Oh my goodness
Because of
gracious.
stress.
Well, okay, so this is what happened. So the posts, which were written back in April, included, if a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent, abusive act, make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls. Obviously a joke. And second, under the Brandenburg Standard in America, that would not be incitement because it's not threatening imminent lawless action.
Also a very well-known comedian.
Also a comedian,
Yeah.
which is in crucial context. Another captioned a photo of a trans rights demonstration, and he commented, a photo you can smell. And the third read, I hate them, misogynists and homophobes, F them. I mean, should the police have taken an interest in this, gents?
What I don't understand, so as I understand, again, it's all very new.
Yeah.
So he was arrested under Section 29A of the Public Order Act.
Yes.
Which, and the offence is a person who uses threatening words or behaviour or displays any written material, which is threatening, is guilty of an offence if he intends thereby to stir up, and there's an added section, so an amended part, hatred on the grounds of sexual orientation. But I can't see anything in there which is about sexual orientation.
Yes.
I mean, apart from the part where he says "F the homophobes," which is actually going on the side of the
exactly. So, but this is the point. So, so he was arrested, right? And a lawful arrest, you need reasonable suspicion by the constable that he has committed an act, an unlawful act, based on the information that he's given at the time. Okay, and then also, secondly, you need necessity. There needs to be a necessity to arrest. I've done cases suing the police where we say there's been false imprisonment and lawful arrest, right? And sometimes we go on necessity because what was the necessity to arrest someone for tweets? Because you've got the tweets.
Yeah.
Why would you need to arrest them? What questions do you need to ask?
Well, we know the line of questioning. They said they were asking him whether he has a problem with people who don't identify with the gender assigned to them at birth. This was the line of questioning. And as Graham Linehan pointed out, your very line of questioning is highly contentious and politicized.
Yeah.
And
So using activist language.
Using activist language. That's what he said. And they came back. Don't bother us with semantics, Graham. It's absolutely.
What's he got to do with sexual orientation?
I know, exactly. It's absolutely breathtaking. And I want to ask you this, Charlie. So this is more of a political question. This is exactly the same week that Farage, in a pretty high-profile manner, is testifying on Capitol Hill about the very, very miserable situation of free speech in Britain. The US State Department, as we talked about it with Roy Ignatius the other day, has just pieced together a 9-page report on human rights abuses in Britain, usually the sort of thing that would be written about Democratic Republic of Congo or China or whatever it might be. Are we increasingly being ruled not only by very ideological people, but ideological people who seemingly are just incapable of any kind of course correction, self-correction, political nous? Because apart from being wrong, this just strikes me as a politically disastrous decision for the Met Police to take.
Well, this is the thing. Part of my work is in communications, and if nothing else, you look at this just avalanche of embarrassing ordeals that this government is kind of staggering from one to the next. And if nothing else, taking a step back and taking a value-free perspective, it's so insulting how bad these people are at their jobs. It's so insulting how bad they are at communications. It's so insulting how bad they are at strategy. Because, love him or loathe him, Blair and Campbell, they knew how to do communications.
Good operators.
Right? And it's no surprise, by the way, that Starmer has hired one of Blair's former aides as his new director of communications in Number 10 this week, right?
Yes.
That's no coincidence. And so, it's just a humiliating thing for our country and for the reputation of our country on the world stage that we're governed by these people. I mean, there's people out there who say they're not incompetent, they're malicious, and I do think there's certainly an element which is malicious in our system. But I also think we are dealing with very unimpressive people. We're dealing with people who are out of their depth, who don't know what they're doing. You look at Yvette Cooper, for instance, obviously out of her depth. On the television the other day, BBC Breakfast, saying, oh, my tablecloth is a union flag, and my curtains are a union flag, and my socks are union flags. I love the union flag. I'm all for that. It's obviously part of a strategy to embrace and contain the energy around the Raise the Colours campaign, because Starmer has done the same. He's had English flags behind him. He's said that he's very supportive of people raising the flag and all this kind of thing.
It's his favourite flag.
Yeah, it's his favourite, and this is the point, is there clearly has been something of a sea change in their messaging strategy around these things, because they recognise, look, if we don't, to some degree, allow the public, do a bit of a pressure release for this tension that's building among the public, things are going to get nasty, basically. And so it's obvious they know that that's the way the wind is blowing, but they don't seem capable of actually executing the strategy in a way that is convincing, because there's been so many people about that Yvette Cooper interview saying, I saw, I forget the guy's name, he's a GB News commentator, I've been on with him before, left-wing guy, but he was saying, he said in response to that Yvette Cooper interview, I put a flag up at Christmas instead of a Christmas tree. I have, my bathroom walls are flags, and like all this kind of stuff. Because it's so easy to ridicule these people because they're so bad at their jobs.
And it rings incredibly hollow, given all of the policies that they're pursuing. Just to finish, Elliott, I'll ask you. Do you think that this Labour government is long for this world? They seem to be sort of floundering all over the place.
Yeah. We were talking about this in our association pulse in a pint on Monday.
Oh, right.
The problem is, of course, is that they've got a whopping majority. Even if the country was a steaming pile of ruins.
Even if?
Well,
no,
they just got that. How do you get rid of them?
Right.
But this is the interesting thing about them, especially like Starmer specifically. They don't seem to care one iota for public opinion. It's very interesting that it may be unprecedented in sort of democratic politics in Britain. It's bizarre.
Yeah, well, yeah, but is the king going to call an election? I mean, what's the technical rule that you get rid of? I don't see it.
But do you think that they are going to? In other words, maybe better said, do you think that Starmer is long for this world? Do you think that they're going to do a shake-up at some point? Do you think Angela Rayner is going to find herself?
Well, she's
maybe not at the moment. Maybe not at the moment.
No. Well, yeah, maybe. I understand. People say, don't they, that Starmer's. He's going to step down at some point. Probably will. Yes. At the moment, putting my Conservative Party hat back on, it seems to me that they don't have a strategy to win in 2029. And that seems bizarre. Like, why would you not want to win? What are you going to do? Yes. The economy's getting worse.
Yes.
The economy's getting worse. Gilts are exploding, aren't they? Getting very, very expensive. Government debt is increasing.
They've got to do a budget soon.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you earn any good money, you're not going to be earning any good money because of tax.
It's definitely a situation to be watched with great interest. But at the moment, they do seem wedded to doing everything possible to making Britain as miserable as can be, and to making their own political prospects is even worse than all that. But listen, Elliott, thank you so much for joining us on Deprogram this week to give much needed legal insight and political analysis. And Charlie, thank you as ever for stepping in.
Always a pleasure.
Too. You've been watching Deprogrammed. Make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment if you wish to do so, and we shall see you on the next.
Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programs, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization. And our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.